This is the story of America's war with Vietnam and how it began. The history of Vietnam is one of conflict and great dynastic struggles, which have led to fragmentation of the country over the centuries, as well as inheriting the influence of many cultures. The idea that
Trời ơi là trời.
called the Vietnamese throughout the
Điện
last
Biên
2,000
Phủ.
years is a bit of a modern invention. After centuries of war in Vietnam, the one that began in 1955 would be internationally reported news and last for 20 years.
America say that they're fighting an army.
Đây là trận đánh Điện Biên Phủ đấy. Thấy buồn quá đi. Bao nhiêu người đã ra đi trong trận đánh Điện Biên Phủ.
A war that America deemed necessary in the fight against communism.
These very intelligent men really thought that it was the beginning of the communist takeover of the world.
There was a genuine, basic misinterpretation of what the threat that communism held for the United States and the rest of the free world.
That's one of the really astounding things about the war, that such intelligent men could have been so wrong.
The Tet Offensive, the fact that the Viet Cong had entered the American embassy in Saigon caused a great deal of damage. It did turn American public opinion totally against the war.
The protests were not even so much the soldiers as their mothers. Because what the hell is my boy doing in Vietnam?
The devastation of this war continues to resonate today. Vietnam is the story of two major river deltas, the Red River Delta in the north and the Mekong Delta in the south.
Đây là sông Hồng đấy ạ. Hạ lưu sông Hồng.
Three geographic areas of Vietnam were first settled, as far as we know from the archaeology, by three different ethnic groups. The Vietnamese in the north, the Cham people in the central coastal
người Cham
who belonged to various kingdoms known as Champa.
Tôi đã đến đây khi về Việt Nam rồi.
Was settled earliest by Cambodians. The Cham people came actually from
Người
across
Chàm,
the sea, probably from the
nền
north
văn
coast
hóa
of
Chàm
Cambodia.
đấy ạ.
And,
Anh
they
Đỗ
were
Hải
great,
Minh ơi.
sailors and seafarers and traders, and they speak a language that's related to Malay, and they developed their own civilization in central Vietnam, largely influenced by Hinduism and to some extent Buddhism as well from India.
Đây, Việt Nam có nền văn hóa Chàm nữa nha, mà đó dominant mà văn hóa Chàm. Anh Đỗ Hải Minh là cái anh mà tôi đã gặp anh khi anh còn sống, anh người Chàm nha, nền văn hóa Chàm.
Dominant kingdom, or the dominant political society on the South China Sea for 5 or 6 centuries. It was the Sham that controlled trade on the South China Sea.
Trade then expanded from Europe to China, seeing the arrival of Western traders as well as Muslim traders from India and the Middle East. Slowly, Champa became mostly converted to
ảnh hưởng cái văn
Islam,
hóa
while
Ấn
Christianity
Độ.
became very important in the central and northern regions.
Full-scale war broke out between the northern and the southern Vietnamese kingdoms. Part of their weaponry came from trading with the Westerns, so that the Dutch would supply weapons to the Trinh in the north, and their ships would cross over the Portuguese ships supplying weapons from Macau near Hong Kong to the Nguyen family in the southern kingdom.
Those are the first European contacts, but they were rapidly followed by the Dutch and then the British and the French. Before the Europeans arrived, and throughout this period, there were flourishing local, quite sophisticated communities and societies, often with cultures that had borrowed elements from religion to the way that kings ruled, to political organization from India more than from China.
India, huh?
Vietnam's interaction with Europe brought the arrival of Catholic missionaries, particularly the Portuguese. It was not until the arrival of French missionaries from the mid-17th century that their influence across Vietnam was really felt. The most significant of these missionaries was Alexander de Rhodes. He studied the Vietnamese language and compiled the dictionary into French. This opened up the language to foreign influence. The French converted an increasing number of Vietnamese from Confucianism to Roman Catholicism. The emperor became angry and ordered the execution of many missionaries. This was a turning point from friendly trading relations to aggressive behavior. The French almost seemed to use the execution of their missionaries as a reason to invade. They were without any territories, unlike the British in India, the Portuguese in the Philippines, the Dutch in Indonesia. They decided to take over Vietnam and establish a colony.
There was this constant tension between different regions of Vietnam, and the French arrived in that context and indeed conquered Vietnam piecemeal.
Around 1860, the French seized the area near Saigon. In the next 2 decades, they moved through central and northern Vietnam, with French troops expanding their control over all 6 provinces on the Mekong Delta, and formed a colony known as Cochinchine.
They divided the country into those 3 regions, which it had never been divided into before.
France assumed control over the whole of Vietnam.
100 năm bị người Pháp đô hộ, họ đã đem đến Việt Nam Công giáo mà tôi gọi là Thiên Chúa giáo. Từ Bắc vô Nam đều có những nhà thờ Thiên Chúa giáo, cho nên tôi rất cảm ơn người Pháp đã đem Thiên Chúa giáo vào Việt Nam nha. Cho nên ở trong Nam cũng như ngoài Bắc đều có nhà thờ, và trong thời chiến tranh người dân không được đi lễ nhà thờ là thế.
French Indochina was formed in October 1887. Cambodia and Laos were added in 1893. In the following years, the French influence would play a significant role in shaping Vietnam. Throughout its history, the country had been invaded by a stream of dynasties, and by the late 19th century, Vietnam had become vulnerable to French ambition. Years of civil war had led to a split between the North and the South. It was into this environment that resentment of French occupation gave a space for nationalism and then communism to rise. The influence of Russia and China alarmed the USA.
South Vietnam is already under attack.
But how did events lead to such a catastrophic loss of life? And how necessary was America's involvement in a war so far from home?